So take it away, Paul.
Well, hello everyone, and again, my name is Paul Karpawich. I've lived in New Hampshire for about 25 years, based in Hopkinton. I just moved there recently, and started this project about 2 years ago. And I'll kind of walk you through what I'm doing and make this very open in terms of Q&A. I'll talk for about 10 to 15 minutes and show you some presentations on various schools that are doing this. But I would love for you guys to just ask away with questions. But I'll start by just talking about this site that I created that you are now seeing. And Stacy, you see the screen? Okay, so I created this WordPress site called Uplift in Hampshire back in the summer, this past summer, and it kind of reflects what I've been doing. And so I started about, as I said, about 2 years ago. I got a grant from WWF, or Worldwide Nature Fund, and I gave uh, $5,000 to the Hollis School Elementary District. And so there are actually two schools involved. One was Hollis Elementary, K through 3, and the other was Hollis Upper Elementary, 4 through 6. And I began this project, and after about a year, it really started to take off. And I said, well, this is interesting. Now I got the small grant from WWF. Let's see where I can take it. And so fast forward, I got another grant from WWF to expand the program to about 10 schools. And then on top of that, I got a USDA grant just recently from their compost food waste reduction grant that went live back in 2004. And that is now coming in. So I'll be able to fund some more schools. And so I'll talk about what I'm doing and where I'm having success, where I'm having some challenges, but in general, it's really been a very positive experience. So as you can see, if you go to the site, Uplift New Hampshire, it's basically kind of a what we do, why we do it, how we help. But I really want to focus in on a couple of things. First off, there's a page there called the data page. And in that page, what I do is I really want to tell a story about what I'm doing and why we're doing this, right? So just four stats that really stand out. One is 50% of our inhabitable land is used for agriculture. 38% of our food gets wasted. 87% of that food that gets wasted ends up in landfills. And 1 out of 8 children and adults across America are food insecure. So pretty staggering, right? Food is a big deal. Yet we have this ability, we use the land to produce all this food, but we have this real problem in terms of wasting it along the way. And so what I basically, in telling the story, I say, look, we've done a really good job with food production, right? In 1961, the U.S. was producing 2.5 tons of cereal per acre. In 2023, that number has risen to 8.07 tons. So whether it's wheat, cereal, corn, things of that nature, we've seen a significant increase in productivity. But with food production comes challenges, right? So we talk about greenhouse gases and all the things along the way. And in the entire food chain, supply chain, 26% of greenhouse gases caused from food production. And then I talk about the impacts of food on society, not only greenhouse gas and land use, but freshwater withdrawals, mammal biodiversity, bird diversity. It's amazing how much energy gets put into producing food on a mass scale. But yet we've got this major problem, right? 38% of edible food goes unsold or eaten. And this was just from last year in 2024. And again, 1 out of 8 kids are food insecure. So I talk about that to just kind of give the sense that, hey, we've done a really good job, but we've got some real challenges. And so one of the first stories I talked about was the story of Hollis, right? And so I'll talk about more of that in a slide presentation. But here's, if you ever get the chance just to read on your own what is going on in Hollis. And I would invite you, there's a link here to an interview that the teacher, Tara Happy, who I gave the funding to, gave to the folks at WWF. And the title of her talk was Turning the Cafeteria into a Classroom. And there's some great information here about how, and this is Tara, she actually not only did the interview in DC, she got an award from the EPA, Presidential Award back in 2024 as well. And here she is with getting the certificate. But there's some great information here about how she goes about teaching her kids about sustainability, and why she's doing the food waste program. So I invite you to do that. And then, so there's some stories here that I would have you read on your own. One of them is the Hollis School District, and then another is Bethlehem Elementary. A great story about what they're doing. A story about Coburn Academy and what they're doing. Coburn Academy is interesting because I gave them money to help bring silverware into the cafeteria to eliminate all plastic from the cafeteria plus food waste. So they're doing a really good job. And then at the end of the site, there's a apply button. So any teacher, K through 12, can apply and just fill out a form. And I would certainly have them go here. And there's actually a form I put together that describes the background of the project, the goals of the project, and so forth and so on. Some links to some really cool things like New Hampshire Farm to School, which you're all familiar with. And then I give things like a best practice sheet so that somebody doing it the first time look and not only get the EPA's hierarchy for food waste, but source reduction all the way down to feeding people, feeding animals, composting, and then landfill. But various materials that you can get along the way, whether it's bins, whether it's a poster on what to compost. So you click on this and you have a poster of in both Spanish and English that you can put above your bins and collecting food waste. So all this information is there. And so I would recommend it to poke around and take a look. But first I want to talk about Hollis, right? So Hollis is really where it all started. And as I mentioned, I gave a grant of $5,000 to both schools. And the teacher, Tara, came to me a couple of years back and she said, look, I'm composting out back. We're doing a great job, but we're creating a lot of compost, but I don't know what to do with it. Is there any way you can help? So I got together with Tara and we put together a program of collecting food waste, all of it. And I put together a cheat sheet on bins and a weight scale and various things that we could procure. So Hollis went ahead, procured all this information, all this material, and you can see they put it to good use. Here's a great example. So the posters were designed by Tara and her students. The posters were designed by Tara and her student. The bins were purchased as a part of the grant. You can see how as you walk through the line, there's a place to put your milk in this white carton in the beginning, recycled material, garbage, and then food waste. So a great effort done by the kids and Tara to put this together. Now, this is the only school that's doing this, but we decided to partner with the folks at Vanguard that does anaerobic digestion. So they're actually taking all their food waste, it's carted down to the Haverhill facility where it's turned. You take food waste and manure, bring it together, produce methane, and that methane is being turned into renewable natural gas, as well as powering a turbine. And so that's the only school that's doing that. And they did it primarily because of cost and efficiency. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in general, what Tara's real secret to success is these are kids that are as young as third grade, all the way down to kindergarten. Here are a bunch of third graders. And she's teaching these kids all about math, various math skills. So at the end of every lunch, she pairs up two kids. They get to wear a blue vest. It's called the Ranger program. And those kids help the other kids divert the food waste from general trash where, they guide them to put various things into the various containers. And then they actually track what is uneaten at the end, right? So they weigh the food waste. And then on the left, you can see here, they're actually tracking all of this uneaten food. And lo and behold, Tara put together a snapshot, a tracker, if you will, and amazing job, right? So she's basically, not only is she collecting all this food waste, but milk waste, fruit and veggie compost, still good food saved, all in pounds. So this was back in October 11th, 2022. And so she was already collecting all of this information, including still good items saved, right? So these are all these items that were about to go into the waste bin, but they put it aside and they collected over 4,750 items. Now, Hollis is a fairly affluent community, right? It's one of the more affluent communities. And so they don't have a large free and reduced lunch program. So what Tara is doing is she's taking the saved items, and every week they put it out back, and a school board member picks up the boxes and takes it to a food pantry nearby. So a great story there. And so here's an example. Here's the bin that I talked about out back of the collection of materials that gets picked up every week by the school council member. And so after just 1 year, the school loved it so much that they said, okay, Paul, we're all set. We're going to take over. And so they took over the program. They're funding everything. The only thing they really fund now is the weekly pickups by Vanguard. But as I was telling Stacy earlier, the cost, they're able to pay for the cost of the program, because if you think about it, almost a third of the trash that gets thrown out back is food waste. And so if you're now diverting that and it's going to a composter, it's going to an anaerobic digester, you are saving the school money because they're paying tipping fees to have that large bin out back picked up at the end of the week. And in some cases, some schools are paying $203 a ton. That's almost twice what other towns are paying, for example. So what they're trying to do is basically go to the waste company and say, look, instead of having you come every week, why don't you come every other week? Because we're not filling up the waste bin out back as much because we're diverting our food waste. So the savings alone is paying for this program. And in year two, not only do they introduce the food pantry, but they give free food to a guinea pig rescue center down the street. So Tara's just an amazing teacher. She's kind of goes above and beyond, but I just wanted to start with this example. And then she even takes food that's uneaten, bananas and yogurts, and she has a smoothie day, and she makes smoothies with the kids and basically says, look, you don't have to throw this stuff away. It's all edible. It's all can be turned into some great things. And so she's just a terrific example of that. So that's Hollis. So my feedback to folks on the call is that to K through 5 tends to be a really good age to introduce a program like this, because one, the kids listen to the teachers, they tend to follow along, and they're very curious and they're very interested, and they have no problem wearing a blue vest. That they're not ashamed. And so there's a real good buy-in for kids at this age level. So that's the K through 5 group. Then I do want to talk about the next group up, which is middle school. So I actually just recently gave 2 grants to schools in Nashua, one at the World Academy and the other at Fairgrounds. And Fairgrounds is a 6 through 8 middle school, and World Academy is K through 8. And it's very interesting. At that age level, at the older age level, the kids are a little more independent. They still listen, but they're they like to be with their friends, and they're not quite high school ages as we know, but they're getting there. But they still want to do this. And so I'm just showing you a presentation that I gave just last week at the Nashua Fairground School. So I actually had three groups, three grades, 6, 7, and 8, and they all came to the cafeteria at various points. And I would be up there with my projector and screen, and I would talk to them about why we're doing this program. And so I just simply walk them through what is food waste, how much we waste, where does the food go, and talk about how just in Nashua, there's a landfill right up the street, the Four Hills landfill, and how what a landfill, now granted, our landfills don't look quite like this, but I said, look, unless you bury this with dirt, that's where you're throwing away. And I talked about, the impact of food waste in landfills. One, it creates leachate or garbage juice, which leaks down into the ground soil, which is very bad. And of course, it produces methane, CH4, which goes into the atmosphere. Methane is one of the worst greenhouse gases out there. So in working with the middle school kids, we partnered with Black Earth Compost. So Black Earth Compost is out of Gloucester, Mass. They're fairly large. They have a fairly large footprint. They actually work with 277 schools throughout New England, Mass, Rhode Island, now Connecticut, and some in New Hampshire. And so they've been super helpful. We have a bin out back that collects the food waste. And so we talk about how we're taking that food waste and we're turning that right into compost. We talk about what is compost and how we mix with various greens and browns into the mix. And here's a great example, a great slide that talks about the full circle, right? So we're growing, we're eating, we're sorting in the cafeteria, and here's the bin that's out back of the school that gets picked up once a week by Black Earth Compost. Of course, that gets turned back into compost, which is bagged and thrown back into our garden. So we talked about the linear versus circular approach. The kids really get it. And so here's an example of just where their compost facility is, just in Groton, which is only about 20 minutes away from Nashua. And here's their facility. So we talked about how this gets turned into compost over the course of the year and how it gets bagged, and then it goes back into your gardens once all over again. So that full circle effect. And what's really cool is that the school, so I again gave them a grant. They are tracking on a daily basis, not only the weight, but as I'm showing here, I gave them a calendar. And so every day you can see how the teachers got eighth grade, Shayla, and 6th grade, Cooper and Anthony, and 7th grade, Serge and Anthony. And here are the pounds, right? And 19 pounds, 19 pounds, 17 pounds. So what we did is we had the kids all paired up, and we basically are having them rotate on a daily basis. So they help out and hover over the bins when the kids go to throw stuff away to make sure that we keep trash out of the compost bins, because contamination is a big deal in the compost world. So we definitely are working on that. And so one of our helpers is Francisco, right? So Francisco, he's a 6th grader, and I gave him the Black Earth compost hat, and he's fabulous. He shows up every day. He wants to help, but I'll just give you a quick example. I'm going to show you this. Let's see if I can show you this here. This is a video of Francisco, and let me just show this to you real quick. Okay, so this is going to be kind of busy, but this is, and so it's going to turn in a minute, and I'll show you. So you see in the middle, there's Francisco, and he's sorting. He's got his gloves on, and he's making sure that the bin in the middle is the food waste bin. The bin on the right is the general trash, and he's doing a great job. He's making sure that everything goes in the right place. So that's just an example of that. Let me just get out here. Apologize for all the pop-ups. All right, so that's the middle school level. Now, the high school level is a little bit more complicated. I just want, before I forget, there is another middle school that I'm working with up in Holderness. They're called HCS. And I also gave them a grant. And they got it into the Record Enterprise, which is the paper up in Plymouth that talks about their students launching a composting program. And they actually designed the signs themselves on Caravan. The kids all did this. And so, again, the grant went towards buying the materials. You can see on the left, there's a board that collects information. So what this is showing is the composting setup crew, the list of folks, fourth graders that are rotating every day, and then they're going to start tracking food waste every day as well. So that's middle school. The last group is the high schoolers. Now, I will tell you that in general, high schoolers tend to be a little more ambivalent. They're very, very independent. They don't waste as much food, right? They tend to bring in their own food into the cafeteria versus middle school and elementary. So they're independent. But I will tell you that I've seen students, and I've got to know students at that level that have done some amazing things. And so I'm going to share with you, it's not New Hampshire based, but there are a group of gals down in Maryland, and they're called Compostology. And so they've now graduated. They just left high school. And so the one on the left they're extraordinary. Advika is now a freshman at Johns Hopkins, and she's doing just studying for medicine. And the one on the right, Angelina, is going to Harvard for public policy and international relations. And these are just high school, public school kids who were given a tremendous opportunity. They were basically given support from the community to do this. And so I'll just quickly walk you through some of the slides, but I just want to show you the power at the high school level when it's done correctly. So they originally got a $48,000 grant from WWF, and they funded 26 programs in their vicinity. And they secured a resolution for all 211 MCPS schools to begin food recovery. So they got a resolution going, and they were directly helping 26 schools. And I'll talk a little bit more about what they did. And so as part of their group, they talk about the process of starting a program, who you meet with, obtain a contract with a hauler, et cetera, et cetera. Reimagine school waste, came up with a list of frequently asked FAQs, waste removal rules. Then they went on to actually create a budget, and they said, okay, if we launch this $48,000 grant, we got to figure out the numbers here, right? So let's figure out the numbers. So they backed into what's it going to take? School supplies, stipends, and things of that nature to give out to teachers and janitors. And so then they went on to say, okay, what's the cost to start a new program, and what's the cost to maintain an existing program? So they actually came up with the numbers for that. And then they took it even a level further. They got with their colleagues, their fellow students. They went to the Capitol in Baltimore and basically convinced the state of Maryland to set aside $1.25 million to be used over a period of 5 years. So this is Bill HBO 150 and SBO 124. And they did that through campaign, right? They did a letter campaign. They did, you can see here, a card campaign of up to 1,000. And it was all directed towards the governor and the Secretary of the Environment in Maryland. And they were able to achieve this. And so now these girls are outliers. They're very unique. Here they are at the same event that Tara attended, the EPA presidential event for students, the awards. And there they are presenting what they're doing in their region. And then here is third from the left is Advika at the COP28 last year at in Dubai. And she went there through her Rotary group. Her Rotary group paid her way to go. So just an example of extraordinary kids doing extraordinary things. And the thing that's most amazing that gets lost in all of this, and when you do it at that level, at the 9th through 12th grade level, I said, I had the conversation with Vika, and I said, Vika, think about the skills, the 21st century skills that you and Angelina learned along the way. You worked and collaborated with advisors. You funded, organized a coalition that led 26 programs. You worked in secured resolution for, go on and on, not awarded and recognized. And so all of these skills were learned along the way. Public speaking. I mean, she is one of the most unassuming but articulate kids that you can ever imagine. So that's just an example there. And again, there are outliers, but I do go back to just some of the amazing things that schools can do, whether it be Hollis or Fairgrounds, World Academy. So right now there's about 10 schools that are doing this. Soon to be, I say I'm going to try to get to 25. And so the funding I now have in place will enable at least 15 more schools to come on board and jumpstart a program like this. And then ideally in years 2 and 3, take it over. But along the way, teach kids really invaluable lessons, whether it's composting or doing what have you, but just learn about their own individual footprint, right? So teaching the kids what they can do, and everything that they do every day has an impact. And I think that's a really powerful message to teach, particularly. And I was talking to Stacy about this. Given the climate right now at the federal level, so I got funding from the IRA bill that went live a couple of years ago, and now unfortunately all the funding has been put on hold for the Green Deal program. So you're going to have that ebb and flow, unfortunately. But if programs like this can be done where you can have it pay for itself and you teach the kids tremendous lessons along the way, then it's really a good thing. So with that, I'll stop and see if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Paul. That was great to hear all of the great work you're doing, all of the great work the students are doing, the engagement, your data, all the different examples that you have. So fantastic.
Yes. So, but any comments, questions like, hey, how did you do that? What are the challenges? What are the pitfalls? What should I be looking for? Put it this way, just a question to ask the group. Are any of you thinking about doing this in your school district? Nobody's interested?
I imagine it's kind of a big undertaking to get something really going.
I'd like to do it in my school district. Being the food service director, we definitely would have to collaborate with the principals and the school board and the SAU, but definitely something I'm totally on board with. So definitely, Paul, I'll be connecting with you in the near future.
Absolutely, yeah. So yes, and so is that Wanda?
Yes.
Okay, and so yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be that pushback, but here's something really important to know. So I'll give you a couple of stories. I had a school district at the superintendent level. Superintendent and I met. He's like, "Well, we got to do this down to the principal, down to the teachers, etc." But then when I get down to the kids, this is at a high school, the kids felt like, well, this is kind of being forced on us. I don't know if we want to do this. And they had kind of a lukewarm reaction. So my advice is try to have this at least originate from the students and the teacher, because that's going to be key, right? You can have the superintendent, the principal, food service, janitors, all on board. But who's going to really drive this are going to be the students, right? If the students, they have all that energy. And so, as I was showing that video of Francisco, this is a sixth grade level, that's 562 kids. And but the way we set it up is though every day, 2 kids are in there and they rotate and they help out and they feel proud. And we bought some Nalgene water bottles. They're like these 20-ounce, really nice water bottles, and we're giving them out to the kids that volunteer. It's as a token of appreciation. So if you can get it at the kid level, it's like magic. It takes off. When you force it on them, then they're kind of lukewarm. But again, it depends on the grade. If it's at the younger grades, K-5, they are more, they'll listen to the teacher, they'll follow along, and then they'll become a part of the process and part of the solution. And then once you get up to the upper grades, you gotta make sure there's a little more buy-in at the student level. But yes, it's all doable, and the cost to do this is now coming down, right? So it used to be fairly expensive when you had to compost or you had to send it away. The cost was what I would call a green premium. But what's happening is it's now becoming, almost cheaper to send it away to a composter. So to give you an example, in Nashua at Fairgrounds World Academy, as I mentioned, I partnered with Black Earth, and they're charging just $21 a week for a 64-gallon bin out back to be picked up. So that 64-gallon bin can handle up to 250 pounds of food waste. So that's a lot for not a ton of money. And so the cost, as I said, is coming down. And really, once you buy the materials, once you buy the waste bins, the multicolored waste bins, once you put up the signage, once you have students that are willing to participate and rotate, once you have those 3 ingredients, you can pretty much run a program.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And Sam, or how about you? Are you, is this something that would be of interest to you?
It does. I think about how to guide some of my partners that are growing food in schools, how to compost the best they can when I can. It's not my area of expertise. Certainly, I know it's possible. Certainly with what we do, which is provide hydroponic equipment. There's plenty of roots and things that are produced monthly and super nutrient dense. So I think it's a great conversation to have is how can we go completely zero waste to landfill in those at least for those programs. So I know that it's something that I've heard of before, and I know some people are interested in it, but at least now I know who to guide them to because I'm certainly not that person. But I think it's really cool.
Yeah. And talking to Stacy earlier, there's a lot of opportunities, right? There's what you're doing. There's and so going back to so one of the schools I talked about was Bethlehem Elementary School. So right next to Bethlehem Elementary is a greenhouse, and there's a paralegal gal. Her name is Jennifer, and she's actually taking some of the compost and putting it in her local garden, or the garden in the greenhouse, and she's basically worked with kids as 6th grade, 5th graders, 4th graders as part of a garden club. So they, and her whole point is the kids really learn about food waste when they realize that where their food comes from, how hard it is to grow food in a productive environment. So by just the gardening aspect, they appreciate more about where their food comes from, and therefore they're going to waste it less, right? If they know where that apple came from and where that carrot came from, and it came from the ground, and how hard it was to create that, they are then going to feel much more, invested in not wasting their food.
Paul, I have a
So-
question.
Yes.
Now there was a bill that passed last year in New Hampshire around concerning composting and making it a requirement for entities that produces large amounts of food waste. I don't know if you were familiar with that and what
Very
effect it
familiar.
might have on schools.
So yes, very familiar. So what Stacy's alluding to is a law that goes into effect February 1st of this year. And for any entity, organization, school, business that produces a ton, so a ton, again, 2,000 pounds or more, and is within 25 miles of a composter, an alternative to a landfill. So that, hang on one second. Hang on one second. So, so that is going into effect as of next year. Hold on one second, guys. That was my phone going off. So to go back to your question, yes. So that ban is going into effect. It's not going to affect a ton of schools because let's be honest, how many schools produce a ton of food waste on a weekly basis? But what it will do is it'll start to get the wheels going with businesses that do produce that amount, because down the road, not today, but 2 or 3 years down the road, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is going to take a stricter approach, and so they're going to enforce this some more. So it's definitely going to put some pressure, but out of the gate, it's not going to affect it of things overnight. But in a couple of years, it will.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I invite all of you to get the word out, and just email me if you have a school or teacher or student. For example, I've got 3 more schools on board, and one of them came through a group called the Youth Climate Leadership Academy, which meets once a year up in Fairleigh, Vermont. And so kids from Vermont and New Hampshire all get together and they discuss ideas. And out of that came a couple of schools that reached out to me. And one of them is Alvern and Hudson. They're going to try to do this starting in February. But the bottom line is there are challenges. You have to get people on board. But for every school that does it, they are really seeing really good results.
Yeah, so you say you have funding available, right? So schools should
I do.
apply. Okay. The USDA Farm to School Grant Program is also another place to find funding. I'm working with some schools up north, and we have a grant proposal in that would help support some composting programs in several schools up north, including some other things. So it's also a place to find some funding. Hopefully that program sticks around. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and so there are those are the traditional sources, the USDA, EPA, various places. And as I was talking to Stacy earlier, what I'm trying to figure out is, again, how to have this program just not only pay for itself, but be a no-brainer, right, to the schools to basically say, this is great hands-on project-based learning. Kids take pride in doing it. They learn about not only where the food comes from and composting, they learn math skills. And then if they want to take it to another level, like I showed with the gals from compostology, they can do that. And there's some great skills to be learned along the way. So all in all, that's what I'm trying to do, is to kind of figure this out so that, because to be honest with you, it's unlikely the USDA is going to be able to fund this in the near future. They may, but it's going to have to come from other sources.
Yeah, and I think that money saving piece is also very convincing. as you know, schools and school boards, like, how are we going to save money, or are we going to save money doing this, or are we just going to like shift money? So schools want to know that information too.
Right, exactly. So that's a conversation you need to have with the facilities manager who does the contracts. And usually those waste hauling contracts are done in multi-year approaches, so it's not easy to break one. But if you can get in front of it and you can convince them, then you can build it into your program.
Fantastic. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone
Thank you.
for joining us. I can send out some of Paul's resources to you as a follow-up, and this recording will be living on the New Hampshire Farm to School website as well. So thanks for joining us. We have, again, a number of other upcoming webinars next week and into the middle of March. So hopefully we'll see you at some of those.
Thank you.